say right now is maybe the number one issue to you?
Everything, name it.
Everything.
Oh my gosh, there are so many.
Everything about this administration is totally dangerous, incompetent, corrupt. It's a kleptocracy for haters.
Everything. It's chaos. It's insane. It's the antithesis of democracy.
Like most people here, there's so many issues. We are being attacked on all sides.
Everything.
The rule of law. You know, that Congress stands up and takes back the power that really is our power as our representatives.
I've always been...
So that's the nationwide protest in a nutshell that happened on April 5th, hands off. And now there's going to be another one April 19th. And it's being run by a number of different progressive and leftist groups, essentially. And it seems like the main issue is Doge. So the leftists now are against addressing corruption in the government. They're against stopping the war in Ukraine. They're against terrorists, against the U.S. attempts to rebuild our manufacturing base, right? Which I've progressive friends who have said, "Oh, that's impossible. Why can we do this?" Supporting Wall Street. Steve, what happened to the left and the progressives? I mean, they used to be the party of the working class, and now they're the party of the oligarchs. They say they're against the oligarchs, but they are.
Well, I mean, that's the real. You know, when they did the rally on Fifth Avenue, when they marched from Bryant Park to Madison Square Park, I was talking to people, and I said, how many of those people are federal employees? The reason they don't like Doge is because they're actually coming after their jobs. And we know that, I think it's kind of common knowledge that federal jobs, you don't have to show up, especially after COVID. You don't have to show up. There's no real criteria for the work you get done, which is what Elon Musk was saying, sets 5 things that you've done this week. You know, in New York City, if a teacher does something pretty egregious, they don't get fired. The unions don't allow them to get fired. They go sit in a room, and they basically sit in the room and still get paid, and they're getting paid very good money. I think federal workers make more money than the average worker who works in the private sector. So when I saw the protest on Fifth Avenue marching down towards, I was saying to people, how many people in that group are really only there for their only private benefit because they need to keep their job. And their job is a cushy job, and it's an easy job, and they want to get their pensions. So, you know, I said I thought it was like 50% of the people in the crowd were probably federal or city employees. 20 or 30% were probably union employees. And the unions are changing. We know that the unions' stance in politics is changing. And then 20%, I said would be like psychotics, like weaponized psychotics. We know that it's like a Venn diagram, and all those groups, the 50, 30, 20%, all intersect in some way here and there, fighting for what the left has stood for, this kind of these liberal values. They're pretty much fighting for themselves and keeping a paycheck that Doge is trying to take away from them, or hold them accountable. You know, we don't have any accountability, and Doge is supposedly going to hold people accountable for doing the work that they're getting paid for, right?
So I found that meme that you sent me very interesting. It basically how it began, Occupy Wall Street, and then how it's going, which is Save Wall Street. And actually, Wall Street, ironically, now you have the left and progressives supporting an institution that essentially destroyed middle America, right? I mean, it's all about, they all the jobs, manufacturing jobs went away, not basically because of profit. I mean, they make more money building computers in China for slave wages, right? And so Wall Street's getting rich. Meanwhile, the system for the past 20 or so years, right, and under the Democrats has literally decimated large portions of the country. And that's the main issue.
Into 3 things, Scott, of the financial sickness in a way, the media sickness, and the psychological sickness, right? There's it's as with everything, it's a multi-level manifold, right? The financial sickness is, like I said before, these people protesting, a lot of them are only doing it because their livelihoods and their cushy jobs depend on it. We have the media sickness where people are getting misinformation, and we can talk about even the cognitive dissonance that comes out when you see something with your own eyes and the media is reporting it as something else. And then we have the spiritual sickness, which is a little more intense and deals with possibly even the vaccines. If you didn't see today, there was a report released, a published report in supposedly a journal. I'll take everything with a grain of salt. But the report, Dr. McCullough, who many people are familiar with, says that the vaccine has led to homicidal instincts and sort of psychosis. So, that would be part of the spiritual sickness. But a lot of this comes from the cognitive dissonance. We're being told that the people marching in the street care about liberal attitudes and everybody being equal, but really it doesn't come across that way to many people's eyes, and that's very disturbing to people's psyches. Their psyches kind of go. It's cognitive dissonance is what some people use.
Yeah, I'm going to play this clip real quickly. Like what you're saying about the craziness. Let me check this out here.
Trump, are you calling for his death?
I am, yes. I believe it's time that the people straight cut his fucking head off.
I believe that the minute that Donald Trump decided to start ignoring judicial orders, he gave up the right to be the rightful president of the United States. He's an enemy of the nation, and yes, I'd like to see him hung by his feet by a lamppost.
You wouldn't necessarily call for violence, would you? Are you supporting violence?
I think there's the people in power, that's all they're going to listen to at this point. I feel like we've done the rallies, we've done all these things, and they don't listen, and that was something that finally got people to listen.
Only way we're getting Donald Trump or J.D. Vance or his ilk out of power is having tens of millions in people in the streets, and we're going to probably have to have a few thousand people die at the hands of cops and soldiers before people get outraged enough to actually force the government to resign.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I mean,
that's pretty crazy.
It means it's the vaccine or what the hell, right. And this is to save democracy, by the way.
Party of, if you confronted them they would say that they were the party of love and peace,
right?
And they want, diversity. But they only want it somehow for who they decide, And I always I was at a music seeing some free jazzy stuff the other day. And somebody talked about somebody laughingly being in control because they were setting up some equipment. And I said, yeah, it's he the one who'll put the boot on our neck. And, the question for me is always, which one of those people that you just showed, or anybody in general, who will be the one to put a boot on somebody else's neck? Because they believe that they have the higher moral authority and they're sort of crusaders for some higher good. And to do that, they will put the boot on somebody else's neck gladly and happily, and with righteous indignation. It's pretty scary. And again, I'll say, we can go back to the pharmaceutical industry. We know that I don't know what 40% of the population of the United States is on psychotropic drugs, right? And then we have a huge influx of really cheap marijuana, very, very cheap and strong marijuana. We have kind of the new agey kind of idea that everybody has to trip their balls off to achieve enlightenment. And, without doing the work that comes with probably doing psychedelics, and it's a very jarring experience. The modern age itself is very jarring. We have this imagery just constantly bombarding us. And I think there's, a sickness of the modern life and the soul being affected. And I think these people are emblematic of it. So,
clip here about, I don't know if you know Nick Shirley. He went in, I guess he was trolling them a bit. But, I mean, the reaction, there was no room for dialogue.
All right, we made it out. Easy. Why are you here?
To show the people what's going on, man.
Because
I'm giving you a voice. I'm letting you.
No, you're not.
You have 2.5 thousand people watching right now. What would you like to say to them?
5,000 Nazis. What are you doing here? You're not welcome here.
I'm not trying to be welcome here. I have the right to be here. Looks like a nice lady.
Excuse me.
No! Oh! Just got attacked. Water's all over me. Oh, what are we gonna do? They just poured water on me. Oh, I'm so pissed. Not water. Are you kidding me? At least give me an energy drink.
Where are you streaming this?
We're on YouTube right now. Nick Shirley.
Yeah, what channel?
Nick Shirley. You should subscribe to it. You'd probably really like it.
This is not democracy.
Can I give a speech?
No. You don't get a speech. You don't get a speech.
Really? Why not?
We had a
Let it go. Let it go. Can't hold it back anymore. Let it go. Let it go. Turn away and
Yeah. So I mean, come on, man. I mean, it's psychotropics. Who knows what that is? But
the woman is singing. I just saw it in the zipper, the text that she was singing the song from Frozen, right? I mean,
Right.
so this kind of shows the juvenilia. You know what I mean?
Right.
The juvenile mindset. You know what I mean? It's the society, the spectacle. Everybody's I say, Scott, I've learned that politics allows people to act out their psychosis in public. It gives them a forum to act out their psychosis. There is no dialogue. I was actually just reading Giordano Bruno's Ash Wednesday Supper. Was that what I was reading? And they were talking about dialogue in it, and how even back then, dialogue it's a attribute, a civics thing that we don't have anymore in too huge degree. It hasn't been taught in schools. Dialogue, discussion. It's really become just about screaming, right? And and who screams louder and gets the most hits. How many people in that crowd, including that Nick Shirley kid, right? How many people in that crowd just want YouTube hits?
Right.
Just want, because they think that somehow they'll achieve a level of celebrity, and the celebrity is based on spectacle and not any sort of intellectual or moral or philosophical or even political basis. Right? They're just spectacle.
There's some type of pathology going on, I think, in other words, so a lot of these, I mean, primarily it was women in the crowd, right? In a few older men, right? You're not seeing, I mean, it's also the divide, it's the managerial class. You're not seeing plumbers and, pipe fitters and construction workers, the people who continue to build the country. But what you're seeing
those
is
are private workers, Scott. Those are private workers. They're not federal workers, right? Or they're not city employees, right? Like I said, I hope we didn't get cut off before, because I went on quite a little rant about federal and city employees. That livelihood, they're very cushy, easy jobs to a huge degree. I mean, some people work hard, but to a huge degree, you can game the system. And when you're in the system as a federal or city employee, you have all these rights that working class people don't have. Plumbers and other people, they have to do a job and produce a product, right? And when you're in the federal and city system at this point, with all DEI hiring, and when you mentioned more women and older men, you said older men, because they don't hire these men anymore. They hire, women are it's because of this sort of DEI need, or this the declarations that so they're trying to keep their jobs. And like I said, then you have the psychotics who are there to create spectacle, and then you have the people who are gaming as psychotics to produce spectacle. Who are the plants in the crowd? Who are the? We can talk about January 6th. And how, the idea is that there were lots of paid agitators, also supposedly federal agitators in the crowd. That hasn't been fully come to light. If it does, that's, but I think a lot of people believe that. And the other thing, like I'll say, a lot of it was people's own eyes. They saw these things with their own eyes. It's evidentiary to their own eyes, and it needs to be proven in a court of law. But there is also common sense. Let's talk about Gramsci, right? Gramsci, Antonio Gramsci, who wrote the Prison Diaries, and Gramsci in the 40s and 50s went about advocating the bleeding out of common sense of the population because it would make them easier to control. Let's talk about the surrealist who said the complete dissembling of the senses. There's a tradition of this that I'm not necessarily against. It's just gone over the line, and not that I get to decide what the line is, but it's bordered in psychosis, and healthy people can engage in psychosis and pull back. The psychosis can be a sort of a test or a trial of somebody's psychology, and it can be development. It's the dark night of the soul. It's I think you would call it shadow work, Scott. But that shadow work has to be done traditionally in any of these traditions. It has to be done from a place of health. And if you're taking psychotropic drugs and you're medicating yourself because you're so fucking depressed all the time because you don't like your life, and then you're going to engage in this dissembling of the senses and this psychosis, it's not going to end well, right? It's not going to end well.
Yeah, it seems a lot of the protesters, they're almost doing this primal, it's almost like a therapy session for them, right? They're screaming.
Yeah, working out their psychosis in public.
Right. And, you're right. It is they need shadow work, as you know, in Jungian psychology, which I'm surprised because a lot of spiritual people are going through the same issue right now. So they're projecting all of their negative internal angst onto Trump and Vance and these, and probably they had issues with their fathers. And then, but the problem is they're projecting, but they're not looking at themselves from the inside. And according to Jung, right, when that darkness inside is ignored, it actually takes over and they become more evil. And that's how fascism starts. So, because you have everyone's scapegoated. And then they're actually creating a type of fascism against the violence against the Teslas. I mean, some of this stuff is actually, these are acts of domestic terrorism, right?
Sure. I mean, the woman getting punched in the face just talking on the street, and the other
went from saying that my outfit was really cute to saying I'm an effing idiot. That's so mean.
But I think that your point of view is very obstructed, and I think that you just don't understand the magnitude of having a child.
Yeah, well, I'm not the one who admitted they would be okay with killing babies in foster care and killing children that have been abused.
That's not the point. What I'm saying.
That's really.
What's wrong with you?
You have a.
Oh my god!
Hey! What the f did you do? She attacked my wife.
Your wife just attacked me. Why is it following me? Why you following me?
You're going to get arrested. Look. Don't worry.
She just punched me in the face. We were just doing a street interview with my camera and everything was fine for over 20 minutes or however long we were filming, and then she just punched me in the face. Oh my God.
The other woman was triggered, and in this culture at the moment, especially under the Biden government, the Biden administration, this kind of triggering was allowing people to act violently and with no accountability again. There was no accountability under the Biden administration from political figures to people on the street. You know what I mean? And then that's a breakdown of society, right? And, I think Anton Artaud, the surrealist, the firmament, there is no firmament, right? And I appreciate the fact that he was trying to move things forward. To me, that's progressive, right? is when you have a philosophical basis, you have a sort of moral basis, and then you're trying to move the game forward. To me, that's progressive. I mean, you've done the work. Artaud, even as crazy as he was doing a lot of writing. He was keeping things together, doing art, doing writing, addressing, which is probably shadow work, right? Which is probably falls under the category of shadow work. And then he's trying to move the game forward. Of course, Artaud was in the 40s and 50s, 30s, 40s, 50s, which was a different time. And again, we're in a time now where we have so much media being projected at us all the time that it becomes very, very hard to find the road through it. And the media and the constant information and disinformation is very jarring to people. I mean, it's never happened before. I mean, this is a new thing for humans to experience. And we're going through this crucible, this alchemical crucible to a huge degree. Dissolve and coagulate. Things are breaking down and dissolving. Will they coagulate? What is the coagulant? Some people will say Trump. We'll see how it works. But it's an alchemical process going down and taking the shadow up and bringing it up. But things, the center will not hold, kind of thing. We're in a. Go ahead.
Well, no, I agree. It's a little bit of a dangerous situation, and the left and the progressives keep talking about the chaos, but they're the ones who are fomenting it. Finally, you have a group, an administration that has actually some vision on how to fix things, right? Rather than so they have an idea. You have some very smart people at the table who want to fix the economy, who want to balance our trade deficits, right? Who want to bring cohesiveness to the country again, make it strong again. And, you have this whole group that they say they want to save democracy. What they're doing is they're going against it. And
well, again, Scott, we got to remember that we're not a democracy, right? So when they're screeching, we want to, when they're screeching, we want to save democracy. That's a falsehood right there.
Right.
What I mean? That's a falsehood right there, because we're not, the United States, from what I know, is not a democracy. It's a republic, right? And that needs to be. It's as simple as that. I mean, it doesn't really have. So even the idea that if you're screeching democracy, you're right there. You're building things on a false assumption, right?
Right.
And when we have all these false assumptions building up, I mean, you go home and you look in the mirror. And look at we'll go to the Jimmy Kimmel thing that just happened, right? Mm-hmm. Jimmy Kimmel just did a Rolling Stone interview. Now the reason he did it in Rolling Stone is because Rolling Stone is is a propaganda organ of the left, in my opinion. And but he goes into Rolling Stone and says, and he's wiggle rooming, trying to figure out, keep himself relevant. Jimmy Kimmel was based, I guarantee you that. Well, I won't guarantee you. I believe that the ratings are fake for all these people. These aren't true. Let's talk about the AOC rally and the Bernie Sanders rally, where they said they had 36,000 people. It turns out it was because of Coachella. You know what I mean? And when Kamala was doing her stuff with Beyonce, promising Beyonce was going to show up and do some songs, and then Beyonce shows up, says something, and leaves, and Beyonce got paid $10 million. So if you're paying attention to any of this and you firmly believe that Beyonce is there because she believes in the cause and she believes in equal rights for everybody and everybody should make the same income and everybody should be living a good life, and Beyonce walks away to a private jet after getting paid $10 million at a Kamala rally to just come out there and say something, there's cognitive dissonance going on there. If you really believe that these people care, if you really believe that Joe Biden cared, and then his son is, skimming off how many millions from the American people, this is our money that was taken. It doesn't come out of nowhere. It's our money. We have everybody who's a citizen of the United States has a share in that money, and to have it being stolen and used for the most hedonistic addictions, we have to, it becomes a disparity that people can't get over. You know what I mean? Some people can't get over. And again, if you're doing psychotropic drugs and you're depressed and you're seeing therapists and the drugs aren't working and I don't feel good about myself, I feel really bad. And then, well, what I can do is I can go out on the street and scream at people. And there's a rally down the block and they're going to allow me to scream at people. And I'll feel better because I'm working out my angst, my existential angst, just screaming at people, as I'm probably doing right now talking to you, Scott.
Well, it's free therapy for them. But did that against the oligarchs or fight the oligarchs rally was such ridiculous. The fact is, the left since the '60s essentially controls. They won, right? They won the culture wars.
Well, that Soros is paying for it, Scott. Right. Soros is one of the big oligarchs. Soros
they are the oligarchs, right?
We can go back to the 60 Minutes interview that Soros did like 20 years ago with Mike Wallace, talking about how he approved of the Nazis and he has no regrets about working with the Nazis. Soros actually said that. Meanwhile, you have Soros up in front now, funding these things, these. We know through Tides Foundation, which is based in the Presidio in San Francisco. I've been to the offices, actually. I had a friend who worked there. And so you're at the, again, the disparity and the cognitive dissonance that here's this person telling you, funding these movements, telling you that he's all about like making everybody equal. But 20 years ago, 30 years ago, he said he was, sympathizing with the Nazis. And that even now, he's one of the richest people on the planet. And we just found out that he got a shitload of money from USAID, right? And, but so the disparity is kind of weird, and I think it really is jarring for people. And it creates a opportunity for psychosis.
Yeah. And I think the left itself, a lot of the progressives that I speak to, some of their points are valid, but the problem is, this problem in the United States has been growing through, democratic control over the years through Clinton and
social engineering.
Right, and it's right. No, I agree with you. And
social engineering is a thing. I mean, they and if we want to go back, we can imagine. We don't have to take it as a fact, but we can imagine that some people latched on to Gramsci's philosophy. Or Saul Alinsky's philosophy. Remember, Saul Alinsky's philosophy is basically like, if you do something, you accuse the other side of doing it. That's almost cognitive dissonance, just in a nutshell, right? Just continue to subvert, and then it becomes a hall of mirrors, and there's no truth anymore. And when somebody is looking for truth, they can't find it. And it's an opportunity for psychosis. What do you think, Scott?
I agree with you. The problem right now as well is, you're right, there's no dialogue in the progressives and the left. They don't have a solution except for get rid of Trump. Okay, then what? And if I have friends that I've engaged, we need to get rid of Trump. Okay, and then what? What's the next step? Oh, I don't know. Go back to the status quo. Go back to, people, stealing government money. Not bringing back manufacturing. At least try. I have a friend who said,
the idea that these people can sit there and say manufacturing can't come back is, just defeatist, right? I mean, there's an elitist kind of attitude to these people that, that there are people that nobody wants to do that kind of work, and nobody should be doing that kind of work, like manual labor or physical labor,
right?
But except for the Chinese kids or the kids in Africa who are slaves, give them their iPhones, right? That's okay. Talk about cognitive dissonance, Scott. Again, we knew for 30 years that the iPhones were being made by slave children, pretty much, right? We knew that. We know that there's, you can name a number, but they say 500,000 kids were trafficked across the border from Mexico, right? Even if that number is a third or a quarter of that, that's still a lot. So when you're sitting there saying you want open borders, one minute you're fighting against slavery, and the next minute you're condoning it, that's really hard to wrap your head around. And then you run to the pill bottle, and you take something to make you feel better, because it's really hard to wrap your head around. And we're dealing with, again, not to get all but we're dealing with people's lives here. These are not abstract things. There are people's lives who are being manipulated and and destroyed by these things. It's. I wanted to tell a story about. I was down at my friend's record shop in Chinatown yesterday, and I stopped in to see a friend of mine's gallery where he had a bunch of electronic equipment that he's refurbished. And it's very interesting. It's like a maze of old consumer electronics, lots of TVs. And he has this philosophical and theoretical ideas about how we got there. But a man walked in and to the gallery, and we had a little talk with him. And he said, I was a video artist, and I have this gallery and blah, blah, blah. And we talked a bit, and I said, he says, I'm going to a gallery down the block. A friend of mine has a show. And I said, I'm trying to figure out the art world these days. I used to go to galleries and check stuff out, I said to him, but I don't anymore because I'm really, so much of the art world now is woke. And it's not, and it's just there as sort of a propaganda. Now, this guy is a New York artist, should be a traditional liberal. And he said to me, I am so sick of the woke stuff. He said, I am done with it. Very, very interesting. So we have there is a middle ground of people who do engage, Scott. I don't think everybody is disengaged. I think, when you have those people out on the street, like in New York, that's only a portion of the population. There's people who might think like me and you do, and I know you're a bit of an artist, and I'm supposedly, on a bad day, I get called an artist too. There's a percentage of people who think like us. There's a percentage of people who think like them. And then there is a pretty wide middle in there. And I think the middle is getting really disgusted. I went after the gallery, I went down the block to my friend's record store. And there was a man there, and he mentioned something to the guy who owns the store and said, there was a trial in another country, and it had to do with like freedom of speech. And I think he mentioned South Africa, and he mentioned somewhere else, and he said there was this trial going on. And I said, yeah, we used to have free speech in the United States. And I said, until the liberals took it away from us. Now, these people are here for a jazz show, a traditionally liberal, very leftist kind of thing in a way. And they sat there and said, well, yeah, we got to agree with you. That the liberals have taken away free speech in the United States, that the progressives have taken away free speech in the United States, that we're not allowed to express ourselves. And, I also wonder sometimes these artists who are making this kind of music or art and thinking that it's a right for them, we have to remember that in China, you don't make art. And in Russia, you only make state propaganda as art. And in, I think it was Pol Pot who killed anybody who wore glasses because he considered them to be intellectuals, and intellectuals weren't going to serve the revolution. So I think that these people in this middle ground, and I think more people are heading, kind of looking for a middle ground, are questioning what's going on, because what's gone on, again, does not make sense.
Yeah, I agree. It'll be interesting to see how many people come out for the next, Saturday, the next protest. Because you're right, a lot of the former Democrats and liberals like Tulsi Gabbard, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, they're all coming over to, the more conservative party right now. And the other problem I have is with what's going on is, again, there's no solutions that they're proposing except for magical thinking, right? Bernie, his whole thing is, let's raise minimum wage. But if we don't have, they're talking about the symptoms, they're not talking about the problem, right? Because we don't have enough jobs. We don't have manufacturing. We don't have industries anymore. And then you have Kamala, her whole thing was, we have to lower prices. Sounds great soundbite.
Scott, that's probably just, Scott, if they've stolen trillions of dollars, do the math. Take those trillions of dollars, divide it by the population of the United States, and it comes out to like a few hundred grand for everybody. You know what I mean? So for them to sit there and say we can't afford this or this doesn't work, again, they're presenting problems to us as probably smoke screens and false flags, if those are the words. Because and Trump is actually possibly addressing that with Doge and stuff, saying, look at the government waste. Look, let's talk about some senator just came out and said that they're going to have a bill that Congress and senators can't do stock trades, right?
Right.
I actually ran for Congress. I think in Lower Manhattan, and Brooklyn. I ran against somebody, and he said he wouldn't do stock trades, and of course he does stock trades, and he's a billionaire.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And people are okay with that. Here I was, this kind of average guy running around like fighting the mandates, but also running for Congress. I'm just like a normal average guy, sort of, and I'm running against this billionaire. And in Park Slope, the people who would hate the billionaires, they hated the billionaires two years ago. They didn't care that this guy was a billionaire because I was evil and he was somehow good, even though I was on the street talking to them and they've never met this person, right?
Right.
And like again, it goes back to like you said, that meme about Occupy Wall Street. Kill the billionaires, and now it's hands off the billionaires.
Right.
It's gotten so bizarre that I love the fact, Scott, that Teslas. Everybody was driving around Teslas as some kind of symbol of their higher moral authority, their virtue. It was a virtue signaling, and then all of a sudden that status symbol, it was a status symbol of their virtue that they could afford to buy, all of a sudden flips, and now they have to like destroy them or something. It's too fucking weird. Right?
Did you see that?
It's quite possible that the left really wants to destabilize that economy, have a revolution, so that we come out the other end something that we weren't originally intended to be by the founding fathers. And if you believe that the United States is something worth saving, and that we do have the ability in this country to better ourselves, and I think that's a proven fact. We want to maintain what's going on. I mean, it's like the socialism thing where they say, well, socialism's never worked in any of these countries. Communism has never worked in any, and people say, well, because it hasn't been done the right way.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, we're doing pretty good here. You know what I mean? Like I saw something the other day. This woman was screaming. Look at her. She was a black woman. She was going, look, why not get? And the black guy said to her, hey, lady, you look pretty well fed. You look pretty well clothed. You know what I mean? You look like you have a nice handbag there. What are you complaining about?
Right.
You know what I mean? And the reason they complain is because they need to complain. It's quite, it's again, this unhappiness is, we're allowed to manifest this unhappiness in the public square. These personal, like you say, it could be like, family issues and rather than dealing with those shadows, those dark elements in your own life, get out there and scream, have a catharsis, have a senseless, useless catharsis, and then go home exhausted and more depressed, as opposed to having an internal catharsis where you work through your issues and you make yourself a better person. And by making yourself a better person, make the world a little better place possibly too.
Yeah, and work together. I mean, again, growing up in Boston, a lot of my friends are progressive, and they're just, I mean, with Trump taking power, it's like the worst thing that's happened in their lives. And I'll say, hey, you have a house, you're doing relatively well, you go to Whole Foods, you go to the, your sushi bars, and life is pretty good. No one is going against your rights. No one's arresting you for being gay, right? I mean, it's not going to happen. Right. Like all the things that you say are not going to happen. And again, it's this whole victimhood, like this badge of honor.
Who can claim victimhood and be the biggest victim, right? That's been something that's going on. Right. The big, I get on the phone with people sometimes, and it's like they're just like claiming victimhood, and we all have problems, and life even in America, life isn't easy. It's not easy for anybody. It's easier for us when we, like you say, we have houses and things like that. You know, it is for some of us, it's easier. For some, it's harder. But you know, the claiming the victimhood is just a way to divert energy,
right,
and not do the work. You know, I mean, it's. I was listening to some Gurdjieff stuff about how like so much of our energy is diverted by all these distractions. When if we could like harness that energy to focus on doing sort of an inner work, an inner alchemy, but Gurdjieff doesn't use that term. You know, and you know, become a better person by using that energy in a right way. Again, I think that the system that's been in place for the last 50 years has, for some reason, wants none of that to happen. They want people to be slaves and pawns and easily manipulatable and no common sense, no ability to take care of themselves and have the nanny state, the government, take care of it. But I don't see where that ends. You know, I don't see it becomes a Brave New World 1984 scenario, and I don't think we really want that. You know, I think those are dystopias. You know, do we want to live in a dystopian society? New York City feels dystopian to me sometimes. You know, it's on a you know, and I'm trying to figure that one out. God, Scott, sorry.
Well, you know, the left, which really does control the mainstream culture right now, the dominant culture. There's no denying that they control the media. I mean, you know, like when I went to journalism school, you know, I actually went to the pro-life rally down in D.C. I traveled there, and they said, "Oh, how could you stomach being there?" And I said, "Well, I happen to be pro-life," and oh my God, like I was attacked from all sides. You know, probably the only student in the entire program that was somewhat conservative. So, I mean, that represents our media right now. And part of the left since the 60s, it's been fighting oppression, right? You know, fighting for those oppressed. So, what happens when you run out of oppressed people, right? Like
Right.
we do. I think the U.S. is doing pretty well. I mean, I think, you know, when people come here, this is amazing. Everyone has so many rights here. So, when you run out of oppressed people, you have to create oppressed people. You know, so
Right.
now,
Which,
you
which
know,
again creates a psychological, you know, disparity that has to be dealt with. You know what I mean?
right,
Like, and if you can't deal with it, then you get very angry within yourself. You know what I mean? Like, there's this conflict going on. You know, and you know, the left was the party of love, and you know, we saw that clip before. It's hate. I mean,
it's right. Yeah.
it's
And, right.
just hate laying out there, throbbing on the throbbing gristle of hate laying on the
Yeah.
laying on the floor, and there's no love there. These people are nasty and angry, and they're not angry about what they like you showed. They don't even know what they're angry about. They're just
Right.
angry, and they need to vent, and they're going to do it in public. And if there's a protest they can go to, it's an opportunity for them to dress up and you know, get their face on camera, get some attention that their parents never gave them, you know, that kind of thing, this weird psychological issues, and scream. You know, it's wild. I mean, it's wild. But again, I think a lot of the people there are more staid and sane because they're sitting there saying to themselves, they're protecting their pocketbook. They're
Right.
getting paid. They don't want the system, the status quo, the apple cart to be upset because they're doing very well on it. And if they have to get out there on the street to save their 150 grand salary where they sit in a, you know, a school and don't, and, you know, or any of these federal jobs or city jobs, and we know the nepotism is so deep. You know, I knew a first deputy mayor of New York City, and I heard stories about who they would hire and how they can hire people, and the nepotism is very, very deep in those. And it's all got to go, and we all have to bite the bullet. And I hope that if when the Republicans have a chance, that they don't turn around and say, you know what, it ain't gonna hurt if I have my cousin get a good job for a couple $100,000 a year. I hope they don't do that, Scott, because that's a betrayal of what we're all talking about, right?
Yeah.
That's a huge betrayal, and you know, stop cashing checks and and do, all these politicians take an oath of office, right? They take an oath. One of the things that I think happened, Scott, was when Clinton lied under oath, I did not have sex with that woman, right? And think about the cognitive dissonance of what is, right? Think about that. When somebody sits there and presents that as a, what, it all depends what is. You know what I mean? Right there, I think that was a real turning point psychologically for people. So wait a second, we have a president lying, and we have a president playing this kind of semantics of, confusion. And I think a lot stemmed from that, but the better things that are happening is, like, we're learning a lot more about these incidents in the past and how they really went down. If you want to be aware of it, you can actually see some of these things that happened. The JFK assassination. People are still talking about 9/11. I think we had there's been some news about the 9/11 stuff going on. Watergate is in question now, right? We know that people are, I think, because of COVID, actually, because of the really dire threat to people's individual sovereignty that happened when COVID was the forced vaccines. I think people are paying more attention and realizing that there are wheels within wheels and not everything is as it seems. And we have to educate ourselves. But remember, the government doesn't want us to be educated because literacy rates, the Department of Education came into existence in 1973, and literacy rates have plummeted, right?
Yeah.
And it might be by design. They want to keep people stupid cattle,
Did you see that? Did you see that story about was it a valedictorian or honors student who, when she graduated, she couldn't read or write? I think it was from Melissa. What the fuck,
I mean, one of the things is like, and I haven't really cracked it, and I don't know if I can, as the postmodern kind of mentality, right? There's postmodernism, people like Derrida and Foucault and these philosophers who became very big in, I think they were seen by whoever's in charge, and I don't know who that is. I really can't. Is it a zeitgeist? Is it a egregore? Is it any of those? I don't know what it is, but they presented arguments that led to this postmodernism that has led to the idea that somebody, it's also hate of Western civilization, right? It's hate of Western values. You know what I mean? Like, if you're educated, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Is that it's a bad thing because, you're playing into the system. When I was a kid in Queens, and I grew up in the 70s, we were, the idea was that we were all going to go live on communes and be like Billy Jack and not kowtow to the man or to the system, and I think there's that still floating around, that idea of rebellion for the hell of it, right? And again, so from Foucault and Derrida, we get people like Abbie Hoffman, we get people like Tim Leary preaching this kind of idea of revolution for the hell of it, and let's have fun. Everybody should have fun. Nobody should work. There's enough. We're in a very interesting place.
Yeah. Speaking of education, I don't know if you saw Victor Davis Hanson had an interesting insight into what's happening with the judiciary. And basically, a lot of the schools, over the years, they've become nothing but indoctrination centers for the left and progressive ideas. So, and a lot of these, so a lot of the judges now that are ruling against, the Trump's efforts for the tariffs and deporting criminals and that type of thing, a lot of them come from some of these Ivy League schools, and they're really nothing but indoctrination centers for leftist ideas.
Harvard just fought $9 billion, $2 billion. They told Trump, we don't need your money, and people are screaming. Well, you know what? It's going to be very interesting when they don't have that money, and they can't. These professors won't be making $400,000 or $500,000 a year. If you saw in Harvard, De Blasio teaches in Harvard. right?
God,
Do you know that?
really? No, I did not know that.
De Blasio, somebody else teaches in Harvard, but De Blasio teaches in Harvard. He teaches politics and stuff. So he was a failed mayor who now teaches, and he's probably pulling in, I don't know, Scott, how much do you think he makes?
Probably
Take a guess.
200,000. 200,000 maybe? More?
You're lowball, Scott. Nobody makes 200 grand. It's
Yeah,
300.
probably. Yeah, I mean, it's part of that system, so.
Remember, this is a lot of money with it. If Harvard gets, I'll go back to my friend who worked at George Soros's place, Tides. She also graduated from Harvard, and and now she is a Republican, but she was very much. She worked at George Soros's Tide. Now she's a Republican, and she kind of regrets. But I can feel in her when I talk to her, she still has this allegiance to Harvard. She sort of needs to still keep that going because it's an ego-based thing too, right? I mean, they pull people in, with it, entice people in, and they profile people. Scott, they don't let people in there unless, like you say, when you were in journalist school, they profile you. You got lucky, you got through. I mean, but and the profiling has gotten worse. DEI is the profiling, right? They won't if you don't support the indoctrination, or if you can't bend to it and be indoctrinated. Not even support. They don't want you to support the indoctrination. They want to know that you can be indoctrinated, right?
Yeah,
so when you go and take that interview, when they vet you for these schools, they go, is it capable? Is that person going to bend and be indoctrinated, or is he going to think for themselves, or he or she is going to think for themselves? And if you can think for yourselves, you're probably gone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really, it's gotten very, and imagine sitting there and having to Bill de Blasio teach you things, right? Whose wife stole $850 million that's never been accounted for. And he's going to get up there and be a moral standard for people? Or Bill Clinton? Or Hillary, who ripped the Haitians off? Who ripped the Haitians off like you can't believe. So again, cognitive dissonance. You're sitting there, these people are presenting themselves as these moral, higher moral authorities over issues that are kind of dead in the 60s to a degree.
Right.
And, and then the kids, go ahead, Scott, sorry.
No, you're right. I mean, I come from a journalist background, and not bragging, but I thought I was a pretty good journalist. I won awards and that type of thing, and went overseas to learn Arabic so I could become an international correspondent. And finally, I got an interview. Dean Fisher from Newsweek, right? Because his daughter worked at the magazine I used to work for, right? And you know what he said to me? Because you're friends with my daughter. This is in Cairo. He said, you just don't have the right pedigree to be a Newsweek reporter. And I said, and I'm very naive, 20-something. I'm like, I don't understand what do you mean by pedigree. Like, and it was a sort of vague thing, you're just not the right, you don't have the right background, you don't have the right family, you don't have the right this. So I said, so you think I'll never be a mainstream journalist? And basically said, in so many words, yeah. You just don't have the right background. You're not the right person.
Well, was it an ideological pedigree, maybe? But also,
I don't know.
Also, Scott, you remember, look at people like Anderson Cooper, right?
Right.
Like, look at, CNN's ratings we know have always been fake, right? Have always been fake. But somehow Anderson Cooper pulls down like $25 million a year. And who's paying for that? The American taxpayer, right?
Right.
Look at NPR. Look at PBS, right? Look at PBS. Great organs of the state, and do these liberals who believe in free speech, do my artist friends, my musician friends who believe in creativity and personal expression, how can they get behind organs of the state telling people what to think?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like literally putting the boot on people's necks to tell them what to think. And the diversity of opinion is not allowed at all, at all.
Right.
We know, how can these artists and musicians and people who consider them progressive actually go? I do want to talk about Fred Mayer too, right? Again, another example of this huge kind of I'll use the term again, not the best term, cognitive dissonance. So Bill Mayer, who for 10 years has been screeching about Trump and how nasty Nazi, goes and has dinner with Trump and turns around and says, wow, I could speak to him more easily and clearly and bluntly than I could ever speak to Obama or Biden. And he basically admits that he was like, cowed by Obama and Biden into not being able to freely speak his mind. But he said when he was with Trump, Trump listened to him. So, and then what happened to Bill Mascott? I really don't follow this story that well, but from what I understand, he's getting screeched at by the left because telling his honest opinion about his own experience was unacceptable. Unacceptable.
It's a defection.
It's a defection from the party. It's a defection from the party, and but he's telling his truth. Remember we used to have to tell our truth, Scott. You tell your truth, I'll tell my truth. Bill Maher tells his truth. It's not allowed.
Very interesting stuff. Well, thank you very much, Steve, for a very enlightening conversation, and these conversations will continue. It's a very interesting time to be alive, and definitely we'll see what happens on the 19th, how many people come out, whether it's more or less. I have a feeling it's going to be less because I think the steam is running out of that movement. I could be wrong, but we'll see.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a lot of people are just sort of they're seeing that like Bill Maher and like Kimmel and these people, which is interesting because these are the spokespeople for the left. They're coming out now and making wiggle room in the argument for themselves that they've been deceived. They've been deceived. And they'll never say it in that, but they have been deceived. And we go from woke to awake, right? That's maybe a cliche, but people are waking up to their place in the world and seeing maybe where they stand in the world as individual beings who have personal sovereignty and are responsible for their own spiritual, Scott, I'm just going to say, like these Hecate people and like I say, these witches, they have all the power in the world. They're witch feminists, you know what I mean? They're woke witch feminists, but Trump's going to ruin their lives. Bitches, if you're the woke witch who has all the power to make things manifest, do it. Why are you so afraid of this, of the orange man? You know what I mean? Like it's kind of ridiculous, that he can take your power just because he's on TV, and for 4 years you can't persist through it. You can't just, endure 4 years of this of what they consider to be this horror. You know what I mean? We endured a bunch of years, me and the people who think like me, we endured a bunch of stuff. And like I say, there's also the Jungian term enantiodromia, right? The swinging of the pendulum, right? Which I also believe is kind of going into a hyperspace dimension where it's no longer just swinging like on a flat plane. There's other things going on. Plus, and I'll shut up, Scott. But thank you.
It's great. Yeah, definitely. We'll chat soon. Thank you very much, Steve. Good night.
Talk to you soon. Thanks.